The chair sees and declares a quorum. This is the 8th meeting that I have chaired on this subject matter, and I appreciate all of those members of the committee who have taken the time, the effort to attend many of those meetings. We have given a significant amount of consideration and time to this process, as is appropriate. During the public hearings that we held across the state and the meetings that I chaired across northern Indiana, we heard a great deal of public testimony. Amendment number 1, which I will offer here in a moment, provides the proposed maps that were released last week. We sought to take into consideration as much as possible the testimony that was given at the public hearings that we have had. I'd like to just highlight a few of those. We sought to focus city representation in some key municipalities. There was a great deal of testimony regarding the discontent of folks up in Allen County regarding the representation in the districts in Allen County and Fort Wayne particularly. We sought to focus that representation in Allen County and in Fort Wayne in particular. There is a new district there in the city of Fort Wayne, and there will be 2 districts entirely within the city limits of Fort Wayne. Also focusing and consolidating some of the districts in South Bend as well. Fewer districts in Allen County particularly was something we heard a lot about up at the meeting in Fort Wayne. Trying to keep communities of interest together. Whenever that was mentioned, we took special note of that and sought to bring those communities together. And the congressional districts seeking to, again, bring those districts together. Up in Lake County, up in Porter County, we heard specifically testimony in relationship to Congressional District 1 in keeping the Lake Michigan shoreline together and keeping it in Lake Porter and LaPorte counties, which is something that our amendment today seeks to do. We made Congressional District 6 more compact, which was requested at the meeting in Anderson. Sought to communities of interest together as much as possible. There were specific complaints about the congressional district running all the way from Johnson County to the river. We now only have 2 congressional districts bordering the Ohio River versus 3, seeking to take into account that testimony. There was specific testimony given in relationship to Kosciuszko County in seeking to bring more of Kosciuszko County together in the state house districts, and we sought to accomplish that as well. I want to thank Representative Greg Sturwald for the many hours that he put into this, many more than I did, although I appreciate having been a part of that discussion and process, informing for us the districts as outlined in Amendment number 1 to Vehicle Bill 1581. I would like at this time to offer to the committee for your consideration proposed Amendment number 1 to House Bill 1581. What is the will of the committee on Amendment number 1? Representative Pierce moves to take Amendment number 1 by consent. Can we take it by consent? Amendment number 1 is adopted by consent. I'll have also for the committee's consideration Amendment number 4. We heard in testimony last week some concern about an apartment complex being divided into 2 different state house districts. So we sought to take that concern into consideration, and so we were able to move some precincts around there in the Fort Wayne area between districts 82, 84, and 85 to ensure that that entire apartment complex was in a single district, as well as seeking to have 2 districts entirely within the city limits of Fort Wayne. The amendment also makes a few other census blocks, very minor changes to the congressional districts, so that now we can say that 8 of the 9 congressional districts are within a single person, 1 person plus or minus deviation, and we have one congressional district at the absolute ideal population. So these are as close as they can possibly be made. So that is all Amendment number 4 does. We distributed the language as well as tried to highlight the maps to the members in relationship to Amendment number 4. Are there any questions regarding Amendment number 4? Can we take Amendment number 4 by consent? Amendment number 4 is taken by consent. At this time, I would ask the will of the committee on the amended bill. Bob Cherry moves that the amendment, and it is seconded. I'd like to ask Representative Greg Sturwald to close on the amended bill, and then we'll take final comments from the committee.
Chairman. Okay. Got it. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate your patience and the consideration in a very difficult process. I did want to tell and give my thanks for the public who showed up at the 9 public hearings. It was very valuable. They gave us some information which we were not aware, and we took that into consideration. And I appreciate that very much. They were a part of the process, and their input was very valuable to us as we progressed through the maps. With that, I think the districts that we've done meet every state and federal requirement, and I would appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Sturwald. At this time, I would open it up for discussion from the committee members. Representative Pierce is recognized.
As always, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to clear something up from last week before I talk about the bill we're going to vote on here in a minute. In the process of asking some questions of Representative Sturwald about the process of drawing the maps, I was exploring the potential for litigation and the need to preserve evidence, documents, and things related to the map drawing process. And unfortunately, I think one of my questions was less than artfully phrased and might have suggested that somehow I thought Representative Sturwald would be involved in some kind of wrongdoing or something. And so I just want to make clear that I've known Representative Sturwald for quite a number of years, and I know him to be a person of high integrity. And so I want to apologize and regret if anybody interpreted that question as some suggestion that he might do something untoward. So I wanted to get that on the record first. As far as the maps before us, I think this headline from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette, since we were just talking about Fort Wayne, kind of tells it all. Proposed district maps favors GOP. Estimate reveals 70-30 split. Now, that would be fine if the Republicans were actually getting 70% of the vote across the state, but we know from analysis it's closer to 56-57%. And so we have still in this map a perpetuation of the 2011 map, which is kind of packing and cracking the Democratic constituencies to water down the influence of that vote. And that is not a fair map. And I'll have more to say on the House floor about how having maps skewed this way impacts the process here in the legislature and the democratic process in general. So the map might seem a little less harsh this time around because it's essentially maintaining the status quo for the most part, other than the need to shift some populations around. And unfortunately, the status quo is an unfair map. When you look at the congressional map that's in the bill, its main policy goal it achieves is it removes competition, or at least the emerging competition, of the 5th Congressional District. And that now is back in the safe Republican column. So that's less competition and I think less democracy there. And then finally, today, we have no Senate map whatsoever in this bill. And my understanding is that's going to get unveiled tomorrow, and the House will put it in the bill on second reading without the public having any opportunity to tell the House what it thinks about that Senate map. And so that's not a good process either. So I think those are more than ample reasons to oppose this bill.
Thank you, Representative Pierce. Representative Path.
Good morning. Thank you. You know, as I was driving over this morning, I was thinking about voters, and I think most voters are kind of like my students in the classroom. They trust us to do the right thing. They trust us to be fair. They trust that our system that we're in charge of is going to do the right thing for all Hoosier voters. And I think our goal as legislators should be to make the best bills possible for the Hoosiers. And I just don't think these maps allow that to happen. And I would just really like a little different maps. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Errington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for making the amendments that we voted on today. But they make me wonder. I mean, you talked about responding to public sentiment. And it makes me wonder, we heard a lot of testimony last week about Congressional District 5 and 6. And I'm wondering why you didn't put more attention to what those folks were saying. Both, you know, it's from both parties were complaining about the makeup of those two districts now, particularly dealing with Marion County. Could you give us a little more insight into why that wasn't modified too?
Frankly, I had extended conversations with one of the young men that testified in relationship to Congressional District 5. And the point of his testimony, both in the public hearings several weeks ago as well as in the public hearing last week, was that he thought certain communities belonged together, such as Kokomo, Muncie, and Anderson. And I was able to have the conversation with him looking at our maps. They very closely aligned with the maps that he had actually proposed for Congressional District 5 and bringing those communities together. So I do believe that we considered and listened to the testimony last week and sought to take that into account.
It seems, though, that one of their points was to make things more competitive. And at least in District 5, it looks like it's going to be less competitive than it was in 2020.
I would argue, sir, Representative Errington, that I read in the newspapers that the Democrat Party chairman felt that the Congressional District 5 could be very competitive.
Well, the numbers don't particularly show that, but I guess we'll find out next year.
Thank you, Representative Errington. Is there any further comments from the committee? Representative Pryor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Stewart-Wald. I know both of you put a lot of time into this, and I've been with you, I think, at all of the meetings. But I am concerned about the maps. I think it's really important to try to come up with maps that are competitive so that we have the best public policy that we can get coming out of the legislature. When you have districts in which, well, when you have a legislature that has a closer number of both parties, I think that leads to the best public policy. I also think that leads to the best relationships and building relationships as well. You know, we still have a little ways to go, so I would hope that that is given some consideration. And I also think that we don't need to give up on having a commission this year. We did not have a commission, but I think that's something that we do need to look for next year and actually having it as a part of law, that we do have an independent body that comes up with the maps. But I think that we really need to focus on what is the best that we can do to have and come up with the best public policy for the constituents that we choose to serve. And having a legislative body that is skewed one way or the other, whether it is Democrats or Republicans, I don't think that really leads to the best public policy, unless, of course, it's a bill that one party does not have overwhelming support for within their body. But I think that we can come up with something that will be closer to that and something closer to what people are asking for and what people want. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Pryor. Are there any further comments from the committee or discussion? The bill has been appropriately moved and seconded. This time we'll call the roll.
Representative Paff.
No.
Representative Errington.
No.
Representative Pierce.
No.
Representative Pryor. Representative Morrison.
Aye.
Representative Cherry.
Aye.
Representative Manning.
Yes.
Representative O'Brien.
Aye.
Representative Payne.
Aye.
Representative Snow.
Yes.
Representative Soliday.
Yes.
Representative Vermilion.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
bill passes, do pass amend, 9-4.
I want to reiterate my thanks to the committee members for your patience and your dedication throughout the course of this process, and continue to look forward to working with everyone as we go forward. At this time, we stand adjourned. Thank you.